Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. There she is. That's Rochelle. She's right there. And we've got a great guest for you today. And we're going to have a terrific discussion around business and leadership and moral leadership and taking care of yourselves and your employees and all of that. And Rochelle, would you like to, first of all, how are you today?
I am good. Challenges come and they arise, and I'm starting to look at those kinds of things as I would like to say thank you, because that means that if that opportunity isn't meant to be, there is a better one that the door will open for. And the guest here that we have today could probably speak on that in many different ways, especially when it comes to working with people and working with business and trying to create a life for yourself, but also to have a healthy environment to do so that is paying you to live. So welcome. We have Charles Spinosa, and we're going to have a great conversation. So how are you today, Charles?
I'm doing really well today. I live in New York City, and for those of you who know, New York City's been through a heat wave. It broke. New York City has been rainy, and cloudy. It's a beautiful sunny day in New York City. And I'm working with my co-authors on another article, so that's about as good as things get for me.
And you've also written a book. Can you tell us the name of the book and what motivated you to write it?
Sure. The name of the book is Leadership as Masterpiece Creation. There's the title. The subtitle is What Business Leaders Can Learn from the Humanities About Moral Risk-Taking. And what led me to write the book is really what I've learned in the last 25 years of management consulting on the basis of having been a professor in the humanities. I taught Shakespeare for some years, and then I taught philosophy for a while. And I have brought that, people say, is that at all useful to management consulting? Aren't you just trying to tell people how to get competitive advantages and pit strengths against weaknesses? And yes, there is some of that in management consulting, but I have always been helping people try to find their defining passion. And at least that's how I started in it, because your defining passion gives you the grounds for leadership, and it gives you the grounds to be resilient, and it gives you the grounds for far richer strategies than you could otherwise have. I can speak about that, but that is really how I started about 25 years ago in consulting. As I developed, I started asking leaders, I had the courage to start asking leaders what always goes wrong in your company. And I found out that they always had answers that were more moral than they were operational. And then I set out to try to help them change that. And the book is about what I learned about how they can make their companies morally distinctive. And you asked me, what was the precise thing? I can tell you the story of the person that I was working with, and I said, I've got to turn this into a book if you'd like.
Oh, very good. Before we go there, I have to, you taught Shakespeare?
I did.
Okay. This is all I was in a play years ago, and this is all I remember from it. But I want to see if you can relate to it. And that is, thus, I have politically begun my reign. 'Tis my hope to end successfully. My falcon now is sharp and passing empty. Does that ring a bell at all?
And passing empty. Wow. It sounds like certainly one of Shakespeare's history plays. The funny thing is, it sounds more like, the last line sounds like Falstaff, but I'm pretty sure Falstaff was never a king. So I have to believe it was one of the early Henry plays, but I can't precisely remember it. I apologize.
It was Taming of the Shrew.
Taming of the Shrew. Oh, and I used to teach that all the time and love it. Which character in Taming the Shrew?
I got to play Petruchio.
Whoa, the lead character in Taming of the Shrew.
Yes, and it almost cost me my relationship. What do you mean we're going to run lines again? I said, well, I got 50 pages to learn. I need to run lines as often as I can, and stuff. But it was an unbelievable experience, and I got to wear tights.
You got to do something more than that in Taming of the Shrew. That Taming of the Shrew, I don't know how much time we have to talk about, but let me just say this. That was the play where Shakespeare really invented what modern desire is, what we come to understand as modern desire. So I deal with Shakespeare sort of as a thinker, but it is such an absolutely brilliant play. And in the play, and people don't get it. People now get very upset because he tames Kate, and it looks like a masculine dominance kind of thing. But it's not. It's bringing everybody into the world of modern desire. And let me just say what it is, because if you did this, you were bringing people into it. Modern desire is where we recognize that we desire things that are not good for us. In the whole ancient world, with the exception of St. Augustine, who said sometimes we desire evil, thought that we desired what we understood to be good. And we could only desire what we understood to be good. Shakespeare said that's not true. And that's part of what gave us modernity. I'm sorry for being a professor, but you drew me into this. And that's what gave us modernity. And the whole idea that we have to cope with desiring what's not good for us, that's modernity. That's part of our lives now. And we all have to find our way to do it. And the Taming of the Shrew is a brilliant way. It's developing a way of being ironic towards ourselves. And that's what makes Petruchio, the character you play, so difficult, because if you don't bring out that he's a bit ironic towards what he says and towards himself, particularly as he makes Kate lie about things, the play fails. So, wow, Kevin, I am deeply impressed, and I love the fact that you played Petruchio and that you remember the lines, and I'm embarrassed that I don't.
No, that's the only lines I remember from the whole damn thing, because it was, and he was central to all of that. And for those of you that don't know the story, he met a man who had two daughters, and one was a very beautiful daughter, and the older daughter was considered at that time a shrew. And a shrew is somebody who was disagreeable and was full of vim and vigor and just didn't listen to anybody and stuff. And so he took it upon a personal challenge of his to tame her, to make her special. And then the part that I just quoted was right after they got married, and then he did not let her eat, and he put her into her room, and he was starting to work on change. And so thus I politically changed her to try and make her a pliable young lady rather than the shrew. So it was a fun thing to do, but you're right. There's a lot of underlying moral implications behind that show, behind that play, that Shakespeare wanted to put in there, and it was pretty amazing and stuff. So thank you for. I haven't ever gotten to talk about this in 2,000 episodes or whatever, and I really enjoyed it.
And your listeners need to know that Petruchio is one of the hardest parts to play in Shakespeare, and so congratulations.
Well,
it's not an easy character to do.
Well, I hope I didn't suck at it, but people applauded. That was good.
Well, people applaud. And as I listen to you deliver the lines, it doesn't sound to me as though you did. I think you've got the kind of enthusiasm you need to have, and you've got to have those high spirits throughout.
He did. He did, and that was great fun for me, and that was, but a little stressful because when you, as you know, when you're the lead, and in Shakespeare, you have to learn it word for word because it's not common language.
Yeah.
So in any way, enough about that and enough about me. Let's talk about, well, first of all, Rochelle, did you know that about me?
No, I did. And actually, I do want to talk about it a little more because what intrigued you to use Shakespeare in your teaching?
You're talking to me.
Yes,
Yes,
this is for
yes,
you.
yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it goes into exactly how I became a consultant. So that's actually
Okay,
good. So
perfect.
why Shakespeare? Shakespeare for me is the poet and thinker of transformation. And what do I mean by that? First of all, in his career, he went through 3 transformations. He started out writing comedies and histories. And as I said, he invented this new understanding of desire that we since have taken over and just take as, we just assume everybody always thought desire was that way. And then he asked, well, who are we when we have this desire? And it's very much like actually the beginning of your show. He said, what is it we live our lives for? And his answer was, we live our lives for the story of our lives. And we want to have a story that's worth dying for. And hence you get Shakespearean tragedies. But that's a huge transformation in Shakespeare. And also, as I taught Shakespeare, it was a huge transformation in my students. Students come thinking, well, if it got a tragic ending, that means you had a flaw, there was something you did wrong, and it's a bad thing. And I taught them the nobility of Shakespearean tragedy. That is, if you die for a life that you consider worth living for and worth dying for, that's a good thing. That's a noble thing. That means you have reached an end that was worthy of you, and your life hasn't been wasted. Just to give a simple example, most people know Hamlet. Hamlet is being forced by circumstances to be a revenge hero, to kill the person that killed his father. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to be a truth bearer. He wants the truth to come out. And he tries various things and finally makes it come out and sacrifices his life in doing that. But he thinks this is a way of changing revenge, and he wants Horatio, his best friend, to go on and tell the story of Hamlet over and over again because he believes that he led a worthy life. Every one of Shakespeare's tragedies, with the possible exception of King Lear and the very early ones, and I don't think King Lear is an exception, I think it's just harder to explain. The character says that he is dying for the story of his life. The lead character says that he's doing. That's an amazing thing. And think about that when you're teaching it to students. Do you know the story of your life? What is the story of your life that's unfolding? Is it one that you'd be willing to die for? And if not, why not? Shakespeare went through a 3rd transformation, the romances he wrote at the end of his life, where it was really, sometimes you want to change the story of your life. How is it that you change the story of your life? And so the romances are beautiful because usually the first 3 acts are tragedy and small, and the last 2 acts undo the tragedy of the play by changing the story of your life. So Shakespeare is the poet of characters that are deeply important, where your character and who you are is deeply important to you, and of transforming that. And so Shakespeare was the poet of transformation for me. And that's how he created, or was one of the creators, for what we call modernity, which is the age of the autonomous subject, where the individual is the most important and who you are as an individual is most important. That's what I bring to leaders. What I bring to leaders is, who are you? Is it worth putting hundreds of hours a week into being that person and this kind of leader? And do we need to change that story to make it even more valuable? And Shakespeare is my guide, or my inspiration, at least in that.
Very good.
Rochelle, that was a brilliant question. And that, because that brought into focus everything that is life. And it's not about having one continual timeline, because everything changes within that timeline as you grow, and the experiences that you have that can help you become who you're really destined to be. And and when you get a little older, like I am, you understand that there were segments of your life that change and ebb and flow, and then you really become a different person if you choose to. And that's some of your work, isn't it, Charles? Is to make that happen?
That is. So when I deal with individual leaders, one of the first things I have them do when we're talking about their leadership and how they lead people is I try to understand what I call their foundational story. And
Charles, but before we continue with that, because I want to make sure that you have enough time to be able to say this the way that it needs to be said, let me take this break real quick, and then that will open up the floodgates for you to be able to talk about this, because this is an extraordinarily important point when we're talking about leadership. So we'll be back in just 45 seconds, Rochelle. If that's okay with you, isn't it?
That's fine. Just don't go anywhere if you're already listening.
You became a real estate agent for freedom, success, and real momentum. So why are you still stuck waiting for closings to save you? I'm Ophir Adar, founder of Real Momentum, and I help agents like you become seven-figure earners. My first client that I coached, brand new agent, made $250,000 back in 2006. What's the secret? You feed your white wolf. That's the part of you that's bold and unstoppable and a closer and able to build rapport quickly. So click Get Listings at Real Momentum and let's unleash your real estate potential.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Rochelle. She's right there. That's her. And my name is Kevin McDonald. And Charles Spinosa is with us. And is it Spinosa, right?
Spinosa, yes.
You got it
perfect.
right, Kevin. Go you.
And Charles, there's a story behind that, because she's the staff linguist, because I am not. Even though I did Shakespeare years ago, I'm not but in any event, the question that we were talking about was Rochelle, what was the question we were talking about?
Was building leadership into a person that doesn't even know it for themselves. Am I right in that, Charles?
I thought the cool thing Kevin said is, over the course of your life, you really have to change who you are as a person and as a leader. And Kevin said it in a way that made it seem a little bit less scary and a little bit less intentional than I like it to be when I'm working with my clients. So I was going to pull out why it is that you absolutely need to make those changes over the course of your life. And that's what I do with my leaders. Is that good? Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, feel free. The time is yours.
Okay. So I start out with leaders by asking them to tell me their foundational story. And that's the story that says how you became the person you are. And inside each one of those stories, they're usually stories that took place in their childhood, but it could be sometimes university, sometimes their first time as a manager. They're stories that really lock in certain virtues. And that's the critical thing. What are the virtues that you exercise to become successful in life? And I had one woman who I write about in the book, who started out as brilliant. Her She was a brilliant girl. Her parents, though, were lawyers, public service lawyers in the UK, and they put her in what they called a posh school, a private school for elementary school. And she did brilliantly, but she was taking on the manners of a posh girl, which they did not like, upper class, wealthy girl. So they put her in, when she left elementary school, they put her in a middle class, what we would call a public school. They don't call it a public state school. And her academic excellence and aggression did not work. She was beaten up by other girls. She was mistreated. She was treated poorly. And she learned that she needed to hide her intelligence. And she learned that she needed to be very persistent and very cunning about how she could do well in classes, but not so well as to bring up the ire of her friends. And she learned that she should cover up her abilities with a kind of sweetness as much as she could. And some of the girls that were beating her up became her friends. And that was how she learned to cope. Persistence, covering up brilliance, and a kind of sweetness. And the funny thing was, or I considered it a funny thing, every once in a while she'd just explode and lash out. And so she'd be Clint Eastwood in a movie, just firing away and shooting people. But that always seemed out of character to most people. In any case, so she rose up, and her persistence and her brilliance got her to the position of a CEO in a small company. And she kept doing that. And then she rose up to the CEO in a larger company. Now, as part of the persistence and brilliance, her team, her senior team, did not have to be high performers. They could leave work for her, and she would do it. They could leave difficult conversations with employees and suppliers and customers to her, and she'd take those on. She took on anything that was really, really tough. But when she got to the larger company, she found two things. Number one, the people that her senior team were, how shall I put it, were smarter and more flexible and knew and thought that they would feed her virtues of persistence and feed her virtue of working hard and feed what they didn't really understand the brilliance because she hid it, but feed that as well and do that more and more because they're more ambitious people. And when you see somebody that's willing to do this kind of thing, you feed it. And what happened? Well, she was being overloaded and she was starting to hate her job. So that her foundational story was this elementary school story, and our virtues, we lead with our virtues. And our virtues, and this is the big thing, and if you're a literature person, you know, it's the poet Edmund Spenser who discovered this, that our virtues are the things that stand in our way more than our vices, or particularly if we're leaders. And so she was at a point where she was oppressed by her senior team who kept on just feeding her stuff to do the virtues. It was sort of funny. They were going home early on Fridays and letting her work all weekend, and she would do it. So how do you break through that? Well, I had to give her a new story of who she was, a story where she could sort of see herself and see why she didn't want to be that self. This is how I work. This is part of that humanities past. I used to try to give people stories out of Shakespeare and things like that. That didn't work. So I go with Broadway shows now, and Broadway shows and Marvel comic heroes. People seem to know those. I told her, and this is not politically correct, but the relationship was strong enough that I could tell her. I said, "You're marrying the librarian from The Music Man." And she said, "Who's that?" I said, "Marion the librarian is the smartest woman in town. The music man's a con man. She's a music teacher. He comes to sell instruments to kids and tell them they're going to learn by just thinking what they need to play. She's in on the con. However, she doesn't know what to do about it. She's the librarian. She's working very hard. She is being good. She is very smart, and she's not loved. And what happens? Well, we all know the story. She falls in love with the con man because he can bring something else out of her, and does. And so you get the famous songs and so forth. So she said, marrying the librarian, that's horrible. I don't want to be marrying the librarian. I said, well, we have to find out how you are going to be. You cannot be taking on all this work. You cannot be doing all this work for people. You have to keep them on Fridays. You have to have them complete their tasks. You have to do that. And you probably don't want to do it in your Clint Eastwood way, where you're lashing out and just telling them that they're idiots and so forth. God hates idiots and all of that. So we experimented, and she couldn't quite give up the modesty she had. Although I liked the Clint Eastwood side a little bit. I thought we could do a muted Clint Eastwood. She didn't do that. But what she did was she fell into the practice of holding meetings with high ambitions, and she would inspire them to think and work hard. Sometimes she'd be giving them their ideas, but they would feel like they were much more brilliant than they ever were. And they'd want to act on their own ideas in those meetings. And so she became a senior manager who was a hostess. And if you've seen Babette's Feast, that was what I compared her to. I told her she was Babette from Babette's Feast. Do you guys know that movie? Should I say? Okay, Babette was one of those brilliant chefs in Paris. The revolution takes over. She has to flee Paris. She flees Paris and goes to a religious city someplace in Denmark with very, very constrained people. And they're all very constrained. And in a movie, she finally wants to get them to come to life, and she puts together a feast for them. And suddenly people who have been enemies and not talking to each other, people really constrained, sort of bubble over and start talking and form a community in her hands. And it's a beautiful movie. I recommend it if you haven't seen it. And that's what this woman did. And that was a transformation. That's a kind of transformation. You can see it involves stories. It involves telling yourself a new story. It involves bringing out new virtues. And it involves realizing that people will take advantage of your virtues. And so you have to shift over the course of your life. And it's those kinds of shifts that I help leaders make in managing their leadership style as they go through life.
Reno, I got to tell you, because I've been on that receiving end of that from time to time, of people that have decided to take advantage of my good nature, as it were. And I had to learn early on that my good nature is designed to help people and to serve people, but my good nature is not designed to be taken advantage of, because then the desired outcome isn't what I would like it to be. It becomes what somebody else would like it to be, and that's not an acceptable outcome. And that's happened, and that happens all the time, doesn't it?
It does, I'm sure. And I don't know if we have time for you to say how hard it was to make the change, because it is a very, very hard change, particularly, if you're a good nature. That's a nice way of saying that you're willing to go the extra mile and sacrifice for others. That's I suspect what's behind your term good nature. And if you do that, you see all sorts of opportunities for sacrifice that would help people. But when they start taking advantage of it, it really isn't helping them, and it's really harming you, and it's hard to see the other ways to go.
Yep.
If you want the floor right now to say what it was like to make that turn, go ahead.
Well, and I learned early on in my management career that there are people that are not cut out to do what I needed them to do. And if I made it clear enough and honest enough, and then they still were not able to accomplish what I needed for them to do, then it was time for us to have a conversation. And then sometimes in that conversation, it would be, this isn't the job for you, or I'm not the boss for you. And you know what's interesting about that, Charles, is I've had several people that I've met at a convenience store or someplace else that said, oh God, thank God you let me go from that stupid job, because I hated every minute of it. And I don't, and now I'm doing what I love to do, and I'm much, much happier. And I said, I knew you didn't like it and that it wasn't good for you. But I learned that, but it took time to learn that, because, firing somebody is very difficult.
It is.
At least for me, it was.
Well, the people that are, sometimes it's not so difficult. I mean, if you get a really nasty person, or if you get somebody who is harming your customers.
Oh, that's easy.
Or you get somebody who steals from you. Those are easy fires.
Charles, just and I need to take a break, but I just need to tell you this, is that one time I fired somebody with one word. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you how that played out, because we'll be right back.
All right.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk. Rochelle is talking with Charles Spinosa, and I'm listening in, but I'm gonna. I have to say this real quick. When I was a general manager of a restaurant, we had a program that was called Quality Service and Cleanliness, and so we had mystery shoppers that would come in, and they would have dinner, and they would look at the place, and there was questions they answered. And I had this particular waitress that we had waited on them, and they gave her a very, very low grade for being argumentative and not very nice and all that kind of stuff. And so I brought her into the office, and I showed it to her, and I said, this isn't going to work, and I think you're a good kid, and I think that you can do this job, but you can't be this way. And she said, oh, I'll do better. I promise I'll do a lot better. And so I sent her on her way. And about a month later, I get this letter. Now, I don't know about you, but I was in the restaurant business, and nobody wrote letters to the manager, because they're just going there to eat. And then but I got a 2-page letter from this person regarding this particular waitress again. And so I brought her into the office again, and I sat her down, and I had her read the letter. And she put the letter down. She goes, "What? Am I fired?" Sorry. She got up and walked out. So I fired. So one word was all it took. But there's and in business, you have to sometimes do things that you don't really want to do, but they're better for the health of the business. And that's, I know, what you talk about.
Exactly. In fact, I find that what I help leaders do is, first of all, understand how they want to shape the business to make it theirs, to make them able to do what they consider the right thing for customers, the right thing for employees, the right thing for owners, the right thing even for suppliers. Sometimes they go beyond, but those are the four general people. They get into business, they have a sense of what's right there. Now, they're told by consultants like me, and they've gone to business school, they've been told by professors that they need to follow all sorts of frameworks, 4x4 charts, and so forth. But they have that sense of rightness, which they want to express. They're surrounded also, in most businesses, by other people who've been to business school, other people who've been hearing from consultants on operational success, and you get all sorts of people saying, to the leader, we're just about operational success. Let's just be operationally successful. And the leaders, I find, want to do something different. They want to right some wrong in the industry. And they do. But the major problem that stands in the way is nobody really believes them. They believe that when it happened to Anita Roddick, say the person who developed the Body Shop, she thought the beauty business was corrupt because it made women feel anxious about their looks and sold skincare products and cosmetic products on the basis of anxiety. She wanted women to care for their bodies. She wanted them to have fun. And she created a store around that. Everybody thought, including her husband, who was the CFO, this is marketing. This is not who we really are. She wanted to change the industry. She didn't fire her husband. But but almost, or maybe worse, in order to get through to him and everybody in the business, that she was about changing the beauty business, not just creating a store that appealed to what they called hippie women at the time. She said, I want us to borrow a ton of money so that we can build our second and third stores. He said, no, we're finally profitable. Let's be profitable. In fact, she had a family meeting. Her daughter said the same thing. He went out of town. And when he went out of town, this is CFO and husband, she sold half the shares of the business. Half the shares of the business for a frightening low price so that she could open the second store. The second store, not even two or three others. He comes back, obviously quite shocked. This is a huge moral risk. She's put the marriage at risk. She's put the business at risk. She's put her family at risk. He sees how much she cares about growth, how much she is making this thing work. And he says, okay, I'll go along. And that's a successful case of moral risk-taking. That's the kind of thing people have to do in order to get those closest to them to realize it's for real. We're on this mission. We're going to change the beauty business. We're going to change the way women care for their bodies, care for their looks, and we're going to make this change, and we're going to make it big. In the end, when she finally sold her business, the Body Shop was the largest international retailer in the UK. But Jeff Bezos had to go through very similar things. Jeff Bezos, as I said, well, I wasn't on air at the time before we went on air. Jeff Bezos had to establish a business that could take over the internet, which was a wild west in the 90s. And he wanted to stabilize it. That's what Amazon was about. That's why he wanted an everything store. And he realized he needed an organization that was relentless, that was constantly raising the bar on performance, that was totally focused on customers. In the very early days, it was sort of a mess. They had all their books and everything that they just put in piles in various places. And a guy named, I think his name was Nicholas Lovejoy was his last name, figured out the logistics so that the early Amazon could run and deliver what people ordered to them. It was very, very difficult. He figured it out. But guess what? He wanted to play Frisbee, work no more than 30 hours a week, and hang out with his wife. And that went totally against the relentlessness that Bezos thought was necessary for his organization. So he told Lovejoy they was going to fire him, asked him to find a replacement. The whole senior team begged him not to. He relented, but it was quite clear that Nicholas Lovejoy was going to work the 60-hour weeks that they were all working from that point on. And so he had to create that culture, and he had to fire someone who was his genius. And it's those people that are close to you that you depend on. But if you're going to establish a masterpiece and a masterpiece culture, you have to be true to that. Bezos is famous too for essentially forcibly retiring his first employee, the one that created the site. Why? That's Shel Kaphan. Because he didn't think he could raise the bar to create the next version and the next version. And that you do it for the sake of a culture you're creating. And in that, some of the people that you have to let go are loyal, have the capability you sought them to have at the beginning, and don't fit with the growing culture, which is what you have to sacrifice yourself for and them for. And that's part of what it takes to make a masterpiece. And I find myself coaching people currently. Some of these people that you end up are lovely people. They're loyal, but they don't have the talent to take you to the next step. And those are the ones, it's heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking, but you have to do that if you're going to create the masterpiece. And if you don't do that, you don't create a masterpiece. And you're not going to, in the end, create something where people go and can clearly lead good lives. Because good lives, this is one of the things that Shakespeare taught us, require us able to tell the story of what we're for and why we're doing what we're doing. And if you get in a messy organization, that makes it very hard to do that. Whereas if you get in an organization like Google, which is very different from Amazon, you know the virtues you're expressing. I work relentlessly. I am constantly raising the bar on myself. I focus on the customer all the time. There's an empty chair in the room that stands for what the customer would think, and so forth.
Exactly. Rochelle, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how this process kind of comes in with staying true to yourself. One question I always ask when it comes to leaders is, if you find somebody, as Kevin mentioned, that is not fit for their position, as a leader, you need to be the one to tell them, hey, I see that you have high capabilities. I see where you are so good here, and I also see where you struggle here. And I think a part of helping out any organization, this is a company, a family system, anything that you do, we need to be able to take constructive criticism. That is one thing that I have struggled with most in my life. And I'll admit that because it's just uncomfortable. And most people take it as a threat, or they have to put up their safety barrier when there's so much help we're providing in that. Because when someone can tell us where our strengths are, but also where our weaknesses are, and then provide us a space to either move forward or take a different position, it can make the difference in the entire organization and the relationship and the communication between everybody, correct?
Yes. I help leaders do that by talking about telling truth to power. We always think of telling truth to power, telling truth to the boss. But telling truth to our valued employees is also a version of telling truth to power.
Yeah.
And really, when you're talking about masterpiece businesses as opposed to ordinary businesses, it's not just telling people to focus on their strengths, you're stretching them. You have to stretch them to do what they couldn't do the day before or the week before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. And you have to compose the way you tell them to do that. And one of their responses when you're creating a masterpiece is, well, isn't what I've been doing good enough? And the answer when you create a masterpiece, well, it was good enough yesterday. It's not good enough tomorrow, because we're all getting better. We all have to stretch ourselves. And so I help leaders try to put it in form of a story. This is the future of the business. This is the future of the role. This is what you have to become. Now, if you don't want to become that, if you don't want to stretch yourself in that way, If you don't want to go from being just simply working as hard as you can persistently into a joyful hostess, as I described in the leader story, that's okay. That's you can do that. You have the right not to do that. But this is what we need. We need the joyful hostess. We need the super analytic person. We need the person that can go from managing 50 to managing 100.
Yeah.
That's what we have to have now. And managing 100 and inspiring 100, not just telling them what the objectives are and holding them accountable, but inspiring them to do something that goes beyond themselves. So it requires composing it in the form of a kind of story of where the business is going, and recognizing that you're stretching people, and recognizing too, and this is the sort of the 4 o'clock in the morning thing. All good managers are waking up. Did I stretch them too hard, or did I not stretch them hard enough, or is this person somebody that can't take that stretching, and I need to leave and let go some other place? I call that, and that's the kind of thing that you're not a CEO at that point. Anybody who's a manager in a business that has, let's say, a soul that's going to have a masterpiece, it's going to become a masterpiece, it's going to be distinctive, is stretching people that way. And you always have to be saying, did I stretch too hard? Was I careless in my stretching? Is this person somebody that can handle the stretching? Did I not stretch enough? And those are the questions that you ask about most of your employees when they're...
Well, we have to take a break, our last break. So if you're listening in, don't go anywhere quite yet. We only have 15 minutes left, but Charles, everything you're saying and is just screaming this word expectation in my mind. I know that half the time people go into something, there's no clear expectation. And so they're either let down or they understand, well, I've done so good. Why is this not being seen? So when we come back from the break, I just want your perspective on expectation and how important it is to set from the beginning.
And I want to mention one of the things that I used to tell guys that of an employee that was okay, but not working particularly hard, and we could tell. And I would say to them, maybe it's time for a crucifixion on the back dock so everybody can see. And we'll be right back.
When the game is on the line, championship teams know the game plan. They communicate and work together to win. We all need a game plan to protect ourselves online. Talk to family and friends so they know how to stay safe too. Create strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, update software, and recognize and report phishing, because online safety is not something you want to fumble. Get more game-winning tips at CISA.gov/secure-our-world. Then share them with family and friends.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and Burchell, and Charles Spinosa is our guest, and he is a management consultant, and he has got a book out. And Charles, can you give us the name of the book again? Hold it up for us. It's a great book.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. It's Leadership as Masterpiece Creation.
Awesome. And what's the underlying
the subtitle?
Yeah, that's what
the subtitle. Okay, great. What business leaders can learn from the humanities about moral risk-taking. And the book is about how you create a morally distinctive organization, an organization with its own moral code, and what you have to do that, which involves taking moral risks, doing things that if you succeed, you're considered morally great, and if you fail, you're considered well, normally the term is in the business world an asshole, and that's what you have to do to create something distinctive, to create something different from the run-of-the-mill black box business.
Charles, when is it appropriate to have a crucifixion on the back dock so that everybody can see, so that they can tell and they can see that what was okay yesterday isn't okay today, and the guy hanging there is the reason, or
evidence of what it is that we need to change and how we need to change.
Yeah.
And for me, it's sort of simple. Can you persuade them to change? No. Do people see this person as someone that they're going to follow? Yes. In that case, you're stuck. If you're going to lead, you can't have an opinion leader do his or her thing inside your company and keep the culture from the way you need the culture to go, keep the performance from the way you need the performance to go. You can always have, I jokingly call them illegitimate children. There are always some people that managers have around that are not really adding anything to the company, but are not opinion leaders. People don't follow them.
Yeah, but she's cute.
Exactly. I don't want to get into anything with anything beyond that. But
I think I just shocked him a little bit, but anyway, go ahead.
But I mean, the point is, you can't have opinion leaders leading in a different way, taking things in a different way, because everybody, when you are the leader of a company, let me put it in the simplest terms, it's like being a parent. And what is it that your kids learn from you best? Your weaknesses. Your strengths are hard to imitate, right? Your weaknesses are very, very easy to imitate. If you have an opinion leader that's representing a weakness to your company, people will imitate that. They'll love imitating that. That's the easiest thing to imitate. Kevin lets Joe do this. I'm every bit as good as Joe, therefore I can do it. And that's where you need the public execution. There are other ways to do it for other people, but that's when you need it. Because you need to make the statement, what I'm talking about is not just marketing. It's not just public relations. It's not just something that is nice for a brochure. It is the heart and soul of our company, and I will die for it.
I couldn't agree more. And in my world, it was even to the point of where if I had an assistant manager, now I was in the restaurant business and I had 75 employees, and a lot of them were really, really, really good-looking young women. If I had an assistant manager that was taking advantage of his position and was dating and or messing around with any of the employees, and I found out about it, that was a very short conversation, because that's counterproductive to what we were trying to do as a business. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but let me say what I think you were trying to do as a business. You were trying to run a business that showed lots of integrity and care for individuals, because you've already described yourself as someone willing to go the extra mile for individuals. And that excludes any form of using your power to take advantage of anybody. So I would say in your business, anyone who had any rank that used his or her power to take advantage of another person would be someone you would have to let go, and probably let go hard.
In the yes, at midnight on a Thursday night, and I was the manager. I worked the daytime, and I walked into where he was, and he said, "What are you doing?" Oh, I know why you're here. And I said, "Yes, I do. I'll be closing, and have a nice night." And sometimes as a boss, because I wasn't going to sleep anyway, because I knew what was going on, so I might as well go to work and do that. So Charles Spinosa is our guest, and we're going to run out of time, Charles, but I want to give you the opportunity. First of all, Michelle, any other questions, any other thoughts before we ask Charles the great, big, burning question, which...
I think we all know how important expectations are, and just to take a quick moment to maybe give your perspective on why, and then we'll close out the show.
I want to make it a little bit more interesting and rich.
Okay.
And it'll appeal, I think, to Kevin and his dramatic flair.
Okay.
It is. if you can give everybody your expectations and make them clear, do it. But guess what? As a leader in a business that's changing, that's like a work of art, you can't frequently. You can't give them your expectations. But what you can do is you can model a way of being yourself that they can then imitate. Kevin, when he was running his restaurants and running them on the basis, I'm making some of this up, we sacrifice for our customers. We go the extra mile for each other. We care about each individual soul, right? He models that. Exactly. What does that mean in every situation? He couldn't spell that out. He's running a restaurant. That's you get up in the morning, you're buying all the food, you're managing all day, and then as you say, you come in at midnight to check in on things. People who run restaurants get 3-4 hours sleep, maybe if they're lucky. I can't even think of how somebody could lead that life. You can't give everybody your expectations. You can give them your 4 non-negotiables or your 5 non-negotiables, but the most important one is you imitate me and what you see as my ethics. And if you don't see that, if you don't glom onto that, I can't have you here. That's the quickest, most dramatic.
Absolutely perfect. That is everything I could have asked you to say. So
I called it, Charles, I called it diving for tables, which means that whether you're the busboy, the waitress, the hostess, whatever it is, you make sure that every guest you take care of with a smile as quickly as possible so that we can meet their expectations, because that is key to success. And that was in this case. So I want to thank you for being here. Do you have, we've got a couple of minutes. I would love for you to talk about your book, anything you'd like to talk about before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, well, people ask me if I can summarize my book really quickly. So how is it that you create your business, make your business a masterpiece? And this is the easiest way I can say it. You ask yourself what always goes wrong in your business or your industry. And if you're a leader and you've been there for a while, you will know what it is. We exploit customers who are loyal customers. We appeal to the vices of teenage boys. We make women feel anxious about things in order to sell them things. These are just there are tons of things. We say that we're going to be advocates for patients, but we're really just trying to get the insurance money as quickly as we can. We do a little bit of advocacy, but we give up really early. Those are just some of the ones I've run into recently. What always goes wrong with your business? Then step back and say, what would I love to do instead? And that's a hard question, actually. But answer that seriously. And then what are the risks I need to take? And you're going to feel them to be moral risks to make the change. That's what my book is about. It's about helping people ask each one of those questions and answer them. If you do that, if you say, what always goes wrong in my industry, and you set out to change it, you will create a morally distinctive organization. The one that we spend most of the time on in the book is a woman that ran a recruitment company, recruitment for temporary workers. And the whole point of that industry is to get people in and out of seats as quickly as you can. And she said, no, I want to treat temp workers like people who should be developed in their careers. I want to find organizations that will develop temp workers in their careers. And she went through 3 big moral changes to do that, to make her thing a high road, that's what she used to call it, business. She had to take 3 big risks that included having people make and keep promises, the accountability that you talk about, Rochelle, getting rid of financial gray areas and dealing, and then actually getting rid of clients that weren't going to go the high road with their employees, which is a huge hit and a huge danger to the business. She had to go through those to make it happen. So that, my word is, my book asks you to and gives you permission as a leader to create that masterpiece. Please, please do it.
Charles, hold the book up again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Leadership as Masterpiece Creation. That's the name of the book. Charles Spinosa has been our guest, and I want to thank you so much for being here, Charles. I've had a great time.
Kevin, it's really been great. You're the first Petruchio I have met. I hope to meet more. Thank you. And Rochelle, it's really wonderful interacting with you. I hope your listeners appreciate all of that. It's really, thank you. Thank you very much.
We've had a great time. Rochelle, I'll see you on the other side. We've got another show to do, but we've got to say goodbye to Charles first but first of all, we've got to do this. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin